Let's be clear, this wasn't just a dramatic sting. Operation Jade Soy exposed something much bigger, something structural. It confirmed what intelligence analysts and national security insiders have been whispering for years. The battlefield has moved. It's not just tanks and troops anymore, it's servers, shipping manifests, and suspicious Buffett chains in the Midwest. The Golden Apple Buffett wasn't just laundering money, it was hosting a covert data node. Beneath the tile floors and steam trays sat a tech operation worthy of a spy novel. 4 terabytes of encrypted data, fiber optic lines masquerading as fridge cables, and secure comms in Mandarin and Cyrillic. This wasn't makeshift, it was militarized.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
A little money laundering here, some smuggling there, maybe an immigration fraud scheme sprinkled in. But it was all one machine. Drug money was used to fund tech. Tech was used to move intel. Intel was used to manipulate systems. And the systems, they were our own. The counterfeit hardware seized during the raids wasn't just bootleg tech, it was infiltrated with firmware capable of slipping past security protocols and embedding itself into U.S. defense infrastructure. Think about that. Compromised components, built to look like everyday electronics, were on their way to becoming part of national systems, communications, logistics, maybe even weapons platforms. That's not a drug bust. That's cyber warfare by proxy. And when the US figured out the full extent of what was happening, the gloves came off. This wasn't just a law enforcement response, it was a strategic flex. Military ships deployed, smuggling vessels intercepted and sunk. The message couldn't have been clearer. If you threaten American infrastructure through covert means, we will treat it as an act of aggression. And the strategy worked. With the servers dismantled and the network exposed, foreign backers started walking it back. Suddenly, those suspicious logistics firms in China, quiet. The Venezuelan patrols that had been escorting cargo ships, gone. Offshore accounts tied to shell companies, frozen. The entire machine had paused, and it wasn't out of guilt, it was fear. Fear that the US was no longer playing defense. And that's the new reality. Deterrence through demonstration. What Operation Jade Soy revealed wasn't just one criminal enterprise, it was a pattern. A shift in how state and non-state actors blend crime, espionage, and technology into a single, weaponized model. And now, the US is signaling that these hybrid threats will be met not with subpoenas, but with interdictions and offensive cyber tactics. That shift is huge. It means agencies that used to operate in silos, law enforcement, intelligence, military, are now working in lockstep. It means takedowns aren't just about arresting a few people anymore, they're about cutting off supply chains, seizing assets, and making sure the entire infrastructure behind these operations is scorched earth. It's preemptive, it's coordinated, and it's global. But it also raises serious questions. How many more of these operations are embedded in everyday American life? If this one was hiding behind a buffet, could the next be in a logistics firm, a fintech startup, or a perfectly normal shipping container terminal? When international espionage hides behind commercial activity, who's watching? Because the scary part isn't what they found. It's how close we came to never finding it. $90 million laundered, 62 arrests, multiple ships intercepted, an entire foreign-assisted infrastructure dismantled. All from one trigger point, a Missouri buffet that nobody thought twice about until federal agents kicked the door in. This is the future of global conflict. Not with soldiers, not with drones, but with counterfeit IDs, spoofed shipping data, and surveillance chips tucked into electronics. It's quieter, harder to trace, and infinitely more dangerous. So if this sounds like something out of a movie, it's because it should be. But it's not fiction. It happened. And if we're not paying attention, it'll happen again. Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this operation a turning point, or just the beginning? Should the US go even further in targeting hybrid networks with military force? Like this video if you're shocked by how deep this went, and make sure to subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Because if Jade Soy taught us anything, it's that the quietest places can hide the loudest threats. Let's talk about the silence after the takedown. Because the aftermath of Operation Jade Soy wasn't just the paperwork, the court dates, or the high fives behind closed doors. It was the eerie, calculated stillness that followed. The kind of quiet that tells you someone, somewhere, just had their operation blown up on a global stage and now they're rethinking everything. In the days after the servers were seized and the ships were sunk, Communication channels linked to the network went dark. Entire shell companies vanished. Offshore funds were frozen mid-transfer.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Piece by encrypted piece. And here's the thing. This wasn't just a win. It was a precedent. Before this, operations like these relied on the assumption that law enforcement would stay in its lane, that investigations would be slow, compartmentalized, and easily outrun, that by the time someone figured out what was really happening, it'd be too late. But this time, agencies moved in sync. Defense intelligence, federal investigators, military assets, they all converged on one operation with surgical timing. That kind of collaboration isn't normal. It's the future. Because hybrid networks like the one behind Jade Soy don't stick to one type of crime. They're fluid. They evolve. Today it's money laundering and counterfeit IDs. Tomorrow it's firmware smuggled into military systems, or biometric data rerouted to foreign intelligence hubs. These networks feed on the cracks between jurisdictions, between sectors, between international policies. And for years, they've gotten away with it. But what Jade Soy proved is that when those cracks are sealed, when agencies stop playing defense and start coordinating offense, these networks fold fast. They're built to be hidden, not resilient. Once exposed, their strength evaporates. But that's also where the danger lies. Because now that this method's been exposed, it'll only get smarter. Think about it, no network this advanced gets caught off guard twice. The people behind this, whether they're rogue actors or sanctioned assets, are already taking notes. They're adapting. Rebuilding. They've seen what a coordinated US strike looks like now. And next time, they'll bury things even deeper. Use even more advanced encryption. Split the infrastructure across more proxies, more countries, more fake storefronts. Because if a buffet in Missouri can be ground zero for an international espionage scheme, what can't be? And that's where the stakes really hit. Because it's not just about this one takedown. It's about what it revealed. The vulnerabilities it exposed in how we screen imports, in how we monitor data flows, in how foreign actors manipulate global supply chains under our noses. This wasn't just a criminal enterprise, it was a full-blown stress test of national infrastructure. And we almost failed it. If the timing had been different, if those microchips had been delivered, if those servers had gone dark before the raid, this would have ended with a shrug and a press release about a minor drug ring. No one would have realized that a node of foreign surveillance had been operating stateside for years. That defense components had been quietly infiltrated with hidden firmware. That biometric records had been harvested from American soil. Let that sink in, because it's terrifying. These weren't sloppy criminals making quick cash. This was a long game. A slow drip of compromise. Like rot behind a wall, you don't see it until it's already spread. And what was at stake wasn't just millions in cash or a few data files. It was national defense, strategic infrastructure, identity itself. And it was all almost trafficked through a buffet. That's why this operation matters more than any drug bust or counterfeit ring you've ever heard of. Because it broke the illusion that international espionage needs to look like a spy movie. Sometimes it looks like a $10 lunch special and a closed for renovation sign. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. So where does this leave us? Well, it leaves the US with a new blueprint. One that blends military precision with intelligence coordination and law enforcement reach. One that doesn't wait for confirmation, it intercepts, disrupts, forces a retreat before real damage can be done. It's messy, yes. Risky, absolutely. But it's effective. And the shift isn't just tactical, it's philosophical. For years, national defense was about borders, missiles, physical threats. But Jade Soy proved the next wave of threats is digital, financial, and logistical. It moves through fiber cables and shipping containers. It hides in tax records and forged shipping manifests. And fighting it requires an entirely new kind of readiness, one that treats a restaurant server with 4 terabytes of encrypted data like the national security threat it is. And that's a big leap for public perception. Because most people still hear Chinese buffet raid and assume it's about drugs or maybe some immigration violations. They don't picture cyber espionage or compromised microchips. They don't think global surveillance network. They think local news headline. That's exactly what these networks are counting on. Because as long as they can hide behind what feels too ordinary to question, they win. They survive. They adapt. That's why we have to rethink what suspicious even looks like. Because it might not be shady deals in back alleys, it might be custom firmware routed through supply chains. or a biometric database disguised as a payroll system, or a fake shipping label on a crate full of compromised tech. And let's be honest, there's no putting this genie back in the bottle. The next Jade Soy won't look like this one. It'll learn. It'll find new masks, new covers, new tools, but what it won't have is the same invisibility. Not after this. Because this takedown didn't just remove a threat, it shined a light. And now, that light is out there. On cargo ships, on import logs, on commercial leases signed in cash, on IP addresses that route through 5 countries in 30 seconds, on buffet chains that don't make any money but somehow never close. It's not about paranoia, it's about recognition. Because what Operation Jade Soy taught us is that crime and espionage aren't separate anymore. They're codependent. They blur together. One funds the other. One hides the other. And when they're allowed to operate unchecked, they don't just target individuals, they erode national infrastructure. And that's where the line was drawn. Not just at drugs, not just at data, but at sovereignty. And once that line was crossed, the US didn't just react, it escalated. With tactical force, with digital interdictions, with synchronized takedowns across borders. Because if these networks are going to evolve, so will the response. And if that response includes sinking ships and raiding restaurants, so be it. Because national security doesn't care if the threat wears a uniform or an apron. If the hardware is labeled made in China or for restaurant use only. If the malware is hidden in firmware or disguised as a spreadsheet. If it's in, it's a problem. And if it's a problem, it gets removed. Operation Jade Soy was the removal. Swift, precise, loud enough to make others pause. But make no mistake, this was just one node in a global system of shadows. There are more. There always will be. But now they know we're watching. And just when you think the story can't possibly get any deeper, it does. Because here's the brutal truth. Operation Jade Soy didn't just dismantle a single criminal network, it revealed the architecture of a new kind of warfare. One that's happening right now, under our noses, hidden inside ordinary systems that feel too boring to question. Let's rewind for a second. When US agencies raided that Missouri buffet at dawn, they weren't just walking into a suspected money laundering site, they were stepping straight into a data fortress. 4 terabytes of encrypted files doesn't just happen. That's not some side hustle for moving cartel cash. That's enterprise-level espionage infrastructure planned, funded, and designed to disappear if you don't catch it in time. Encrypted messages in Mandarin and Cyrillic. Financial and biometric files tagged with military-grade encryption. Fiber optic cables routed through fake refrigeration units. If that's what they found in a restaurant, what do you think is sitting untouched in places that no one's even checking yet? The Golden Apple buffet wasn't a fluke. It was a stress test, a controlled leak of influence and access. And we're only lucky that the cracks showed before it was too late. But let's be honest, this isn't the first time we've heard whispers about these kinds of front operations. What made Jade Soy different was that it didn't just use crime to fuel espionage. It used crime as espionage. The laundering, it wasn't just for profit. It was cover. The smuggling, it wasn't just to move drugs, it was moving tools of infiltration. Counterfeit microchips with backdoors. Sensitive biometric files that could map vulnerabilities in US systems. This wasn't just a cartel network, it was a chess move. And that's what makes this operation so critical. Because for once, the US didn't wait for checkmate. It flipped the board. Military interdictions, tactical raids, asset freezes, diplomatic pressure. You don't deploy that kind of full-spectrum force unless you're dealing with something much more than cash and contraband. You're dealing with a threat that plays by no rules. That merges black market logistics with state-sponsored surveillance. That exploits the slowness of bureaucracy and the gaps in global policy to operate right in plain sight. And the worst part, it worked. Until it didn't. Because Jade Soy wasn't just exposed, it was obliterated. The US didn't just arrest a few low-level players, they unraveled the supply chain. They blew open the digital infrastructure. They sank the ships carrying the next wave of compromised tech. And most importantly, they forced the shadow back into the shadows. The sponsors backed off. The servers went silent. The logistics froze mid-route. That's not coincidence, that's deterrence. But let's not kid ourselves. This is just the beginning. You don't spend years building a covert global pipeline and give up after one raid. The people behind Jade Soy aren't going to vanish. They're going to pivot. That's what makes hybrid networks so hard to kill. They don't collapse. They adapt. The next operation might not involve a restaurant. It might be a mobile app, a shipping startup, a firmware update no one thinks to inspect. And the scariest part, you won't know until it's too late unless you're already watching. That's why Operation Jade Soy is being treated as a blueprint moving forward. Because it's not enough to treat hybrid threats like traditional crime. This isn't about building a case, it's about disrupting capability. Before it hits, before it spreads, before it embeds itself so deep in your infrastructure that removing it means taking down your own systems. That's why we saw the shift to offense. The interdictions at sea weren't just symbolic, they were strategic. When vessels refused to stop and were sunk, it wasn't about escalation. It was about elimination. A message to every future operation that thinks it can move military-grade tech under the radar. If you run, you're a target, not a suspect. It's a whole new doctrine. Less courtroom, more command center. And while that might sound extreme, ask yourself what would have happened if those microchips had entered defense supply chains. What if that firmware had been installed in communications platforms? What if that biometric data had been quietly funneled to foreign intelligence agencies without anyone noticing? That's not crime. That's infiltration. And you can't prosecute your way out of it. You have to prevent it. That's what this operation did. It shut it down before the real damage hit. And that shift from reactive policing to preemptive strikes is what separates Jade Soy from every other criminal bust of the past decade. But with that shift comes new responsibility. Because if the US is going to start treating hybrid threats like national security issues, it means constant vigilance. Not just from agencies but from every layer of the system. Customs, ports, tech companies, infrastructure audits. It's not just a defense problem, it's an economy-wide problem. Because the way these networks survive isn't just through stealth, it's through legitimacy. They use real shipping lanes, real business licenses, real tax filings. They embed themselves in the flow of everyday commerce so deeply that pulling them out risks damaging the system they've invaded. That's the genius of it and the horror. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button, it tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.